Howdy, everyone. Matt here. Matt, the PT. Thank you for tuning in. I thought I would have a little channel, something to share my thoughts, things that I see, stimulate discussions on things that are going on in the world of healthcare and physical therapy, or things that just affect us as physical therapists and physical therapist assistants and people who just work in the rehab world. So hope this can take off and we can stimulate a good conversation. And I feel like that's the biggest thing, that we talk about these things. So I wanted to start off this one in discussing what I think is the future of physical therapy. So what it's going to be, what it's possibly going to look like, 10, 15, 20 years down the line. Because I'm in my 40s now, so 20 years I'm going to be in my 60s. So probably at the tail end of my career. But what I think is going to look like going forward. And I know stuff that I see, it's like on both sides. You see this good stuff that people talk about, like, oh, it's going to be so great, and there's going to be so many physical therapists, and people are going to be coming to us, and we're going to be changing the world. But then you see this doom and gloom stuff that people say, like, oh, it's dying, and you're not going to make any money doing it, and we're going to be replaced with AI and robots and stuff like that. But I'll talk about a couple different points about it. So one thing, I've been a therapist almost 14 years now. And I would say in this 14 years, really the field of physical therapy hasn't changed a ton. And it's not too terribly different than what it was when I started out. Now, there are a few differences. There are some of those things. But overall, I would say like the profession as a whole is not extremely different. And I really think that the profession itself, as we go, it's not going to be too terribly different than it is now. Now, I will say one thing. Whenever I see people post about like the doom and gloom, they say these things like in 5 years, in 10 years. Whenever people say that stuff, I always feel like they're just doing it for engagement and stuff now. They're doing it for the now. They're not really caring too much about the prediction in the future. Will they be right? Very rarely. I mean, if you look at people like sports and like, is an athlete going to be a Hall of Famer or even like a pro, is going to last in a league, or people with finances and stuff like that. I noticed that years ago when really getting into like watching sports and listen to analysts, and they're trying to make these predictions for stuff so far in the future, and so often they're wrong. There are so many more who are wrong and who completely miss the mark in what they say. And there's like this very, very small handful that occasionally get things right. But I always feel like when people talk about that doom and gloom stuff there in the future, they're just doing it for engagement right now. Because if we say this is just going to be gone in 5 years, you're going to get some people that may agree with them, and they're going to comment and they're going to engage with it. You're going to get a small percentage of people that are going to disagree with it, but it's still like engagement. So you just still get people just commenting, and it just brings them up. So it just gives attention. And there's a large amount that don't pay attention to it at all. They just see it and just really go by. And I see the thing is like why again like why it's not really important to pay attention to that when somebody says these like crazy predictions is that what happens when that comes to when it comes due in 5 years. Like, is anyone really going to remember it? Like, that's the thing. Like, the occasional times that someone is right, yes, they're going to bring it back up. They're going to bring up that tweet or that quote or that clip where they were right on something. But far more often when they're not correct or they're way off the mark, that comment, that video, the tweet, whatever is buried. It is buried so deep because they have continued with other stuff in that period of time. It's lost. And the people who said something about it then, they just forget about it in the future. So when it comes to that 5 years, or the person just deleted it or just got rid of it. And so when it hits that 5-year mark, there's no evidence. It's too hard to go back and look. So I don't think it's really worth paying a ton of attention to, and I would say on either side, good or bad. So when everybody says like, it's going to be great, can we put a whole lot into that? I know there's stuff that, again, when I started around 2010, there was the APTA Vision 2020. That was, 10 years down the line, and it had been going on well before I had been a PT as well. And it was this great, wonderful idea. But I will say with anything, life happens, the world happens, things happen, things change, and it changes all of that. So we really need to keep that in mind. So when everybody posts those crazy things, it's like, okay, that's what it is. But I do think a couple things will be different. I mean, one, I think there'll probably be a few more PT schools putting out therapists. I think we're still going to be putting out a good number of therapists, physical therapists, and I'm just going to say physical therapists at this point. We'll talk about PTAs in a minute, but as they're still going to be putting out physical therapists. They're still going to be graduating a high rate of them, and because there's a demand for what we do, there is a demand for that. And I know, again, people say like, oh, we're going to be doing this. Really, if you get into situations, if you were like, go to a hospital setting, an outpatient of a hospital or inpatient hospital, see, there are so many people with accidents that can't function, that can't walk. That's a big one. Brain injuries, spinal cord injuries, people after a surgery. So there is a huge number of people out there that are wanting this. There's still going to be the people out there dealing with pain and injury. And I work in orthopedics. So I are still fighting to get patients in, and I'm competing against, other physical therapists, chiropractors, physicians with, surgeries and those things. And even just like, the charlatan people online that post these random, we can fix your pain with this pill or this stretch or this program that, goes for 38 months or whatever. And or here's this strap that'll just fix all of your pain and your marriage problems and all that if you just stretch every day. It's like, and I'm still competing with that stuff. And we're always going to be competing against that stuff for, here to kingdom come. We're going to keep battling against that stuff. But so I think there's still going to be a demand from people to see us and for the services. Maybe not see us, I would say. I may misquote it on that, but of what we do. They want to feel better. I want to walk. I want to go back to running. I want to go back to golfing. I want to go back to do these things. And so they may not be saying like, I'll need to see a physical therapist, but they're saying, I want to do these things. And we can be the ones who fill in that spot. Now we'll say in terms of that with schooling and, student loans, that's a big one. That's probably its own topic all into itself. But I will say I've talked to some high schoolers and let them know about, with the student loans, they are very aware of it. So this upcoming generation that is in high school now, they are very aware of the student loan burden that the people who are, let's see, if they're in the 18s, so the people who are, 6, 7, 8 years ahead of them are dealing with, they are aware of it. And they are like, I said something about student loans. They're like, oh yeah, we know about it. We know. So they're going in understanding that there's a possibility of these large student loans. So I am hopeful that they will understand about those things. I will say, I don't think student loans are ever going to be canceled. I don't believe that whatsoever. It's just something that politicians dangle out in front of everybody. They're never going to cancel student loans. I do hope maybe there's reform with school and letting schools know, like, you need to start competing on price, and price is price point is important. I do unfortunately think that if the cost of school keeps going up, the only people who are going to go to PT school are people whose families can afford it. So that's the more of the upper middle class and upper class people that have this income to be able to pay for the school much easier and not take out these loans. Whereas again, this would be another talk onto itself, but the people that, come from backgrounds like, yes, physical therapy, to be a physical therapist is a very esteemed profession and things, that you can do. But seeing that, wow, you're going to graduate and you're going to have all this debt, and you're going to just continue that cycle of being, in debt that you're not really going to be able to get ahead. So I do think about that, but hopefully there would be some change that goes on with just the overall cost of school. When it comes to insurance, starting off like Medicare, I don't think Medicare, I think it's always going to get cut. It's always going to be cut. If you dealt with anything, with government, they don't like spending a lot of money. They will spend money on dumb stuff. But when it comes to things like that, it's just a pool of money. And so you have these people, the representatives, the people working in government, they just have a pool. That's all it is. It's just a pool of money that they're just trying to allocate appropriately. And they're to save money. What do? Well, we're just going to pay less. So it just saves them money because they're just going to end up paying less money out. So that's kind of really the thing about it. They're just going to keep paying less and less money on it. So I do think Medicare is just going to get cut more and more, and across the board, not just PT, but for, of course, other therapy service, OT, speech, physicians are going to be cut. They're just going to keep cutting that more and more. I will say I do believe that coming down the line, there will be the ability for physical therapists to opt out of taking Medicare. So that is a point now. Like physicians can opt out of taking Medicare. We as PTs can't, but I do think it's in the future that we'll be able to opt out. So to be able to see people who are on Medicare, who have Medicare, and that may want to pay cash and not go through the headache of dealing with that. So I think that is coming down the line, and I've heard some stuff being spoken about it. When it comes to other insurances, I think we're probably still going to have that same fight with them. I do like with social media, there are people out there that are pointing out what these companies do, what health insurance companies do. They keep raising premiums. They keep cutting what they pay to providers and making record profits. And like, that's what they're continuing to do. But people are bringing light, and you bring to light, like, look, it's not us that are doing these things. They're just taking more money from your paycheck, not paying us as your providers as much. They're cutting it, and they're just keeping the difference. They're making it harder for you to come see us. So I think there's a big opportunity, which I do think the tide is changing, of like blasting that out there, letting people know this is what your insurance company does. But unfortunately, I do think as well, it's going to have to take some, the government stepping in with laws and stuff that are going to prevent them from denying care and cutting costs So I do unfortunately think like that's going to have to be on the horizon. That's going to have to come up. Now, I said something about PTAs earlier. That's one I'm just very unsure about. I'm just very unsure. I'm going to say this right now. I'm a big fan of PTAs. I think that they are this, PTs, we're all therapists. Our goals are always to help patients, to help the public. And what they do is just a little different. And I always felt that when they said a PTA should be an extension of a PT, like I've always felt like, yeah, that's what it should be. That if I evaluate somebody and then they go see the PTA that's here, the care is no different. And that the patient is going to get taken care of no matter which one of us that they see. But, I mean, I feel like they kind of get crapped on quite a bit. I know there was change last year with the House of Delegates that they gave them a full vote in the House. And I think we have 2 representatives. I think there's 2 PTA representatives. And there was some fight over that whole thing, which we'll talk about that in the future. But I'm like, no, they need a voice. PTAs need a voice. They spend just as much time with patients. They do the same thing that we do, So I think they're going to get more of a voice, or that we really need to allow them to have more of a voice in the profession. I don't think they're ever going to like take it over, which some of the people say that they're that's their fear. Like it ain't going to happen. But I think there's something I heard and I saw. And they talked about that they're possibly thinking about making the PTA a bachelor's degree. So it goes out of community colleges into 4-year colleges. The thing is, though, people that I've read stories. I'm just saying, I've read stories that people that became PTA said, I left this one job. This is my second career that I restarted over. I went, I got my associates in PTA and I love what I do. And of course, it's a lower cost. And people are like, I can treat people, I can help people. And they were able to get through school fast because, again, it's not a super long program. Again, it's a 2-year degree, so not a super long program, and it's a cheaper cost. So it's like, that's great. That's really great. But making it a bachelor's, I can see, one, you raise the education level of it. I'm like, okay, I see that. I understand that. And because I've heard that from PTAs that they felt like their schooling was so fast. Like, oh, we just went through all this, and they're like not ready when the time comes. It's like, we wish we had spent more time on this and more time on there. So yes, there is that. So it's like making it a 4-year that you do spend a little bit more time in that, like, could bring up that, the education level that which people have said. So, I mean, there could be there's both sides to that there. But it's also going to limit, again, people getting into it, because now I have to go for 4 years, possibly 4 years. So people need to go that route. And then really it's like, what's the difference in going from a PTA to a PT? So we may not have enough. I mean, and again, I can see, with the Medicare cuts, that PTAs had that 15% cut on this, the same services that the PT does, that, okay, maybe they can argue to say, hey, look, their education level is higher. Again, you're just dealing with government officials that don't know any different. But look, the education level is higher, so maybe they wouldn't cut it. I know there's insurance companies, and I've seen them in the past. They're like, they don't allow PTAs to treat patients, which I think is just dumb. And it's like, no, PTAs cannot treat. We don't authorize. And it's like, why not? But then I can see that's an argument that to say, look at the education level, and all I'm saying when I say that is just the ground level education. There are PTAs out there with very educated, very knowledgeable, very experienced on that. But I'm saying, like, the people in these they just look at information on a page that you give them. So that's what they're seeing. But so I can say, okay, yes, if you go to a 4-year college and you have a bachelor's in, as a physical therapist assistant, that it may be more bridge programs on that. I don't know. Okay, anyway, but all that, I honestly think that, in my opinion, the needle is not going to move a ton. We're still going to be dealing with some of the same things in 5 years. We're still going to be dealing with some of the same things in 10 years, and maybe even 20 years. Because I always feel like overall things change very gradual. It's not going to be huge. We do have a lot of awareness now. We do have a lot of advocates now. Social media, this is a great way that we get out and we bring these issues to the public, to our patients. We bring it out to one another, and that we're able to deal with these things more. So I do think it's good there's some ways that we're bringing attention to these things that we can help combat them. But like I said, overall, I'm not going to be doom and gloom and say it's just going to be the terrible thing. I love what I do. I love being a PT. I love helping people. And I see so many people that are like, man, like, thank you so much for helping me. And there's more. I mean, there's one study that says of the 70 some odd % of the world's population can benefit from conservative care. What is it? 8 billion people, 9 billion people, 70% of that. There's plenty of people. There's plenty. And I talk to therapists all over the world, and they're all dealing with the same things. We all deal with the same things. There's still the public is still wanting, I want to walk again. I want to get rid of this pain. I want to go back to playing this sport. My child can't do this. My parent can't do that. So there's still that need. That need is always going to be there on it. So, like I said, let me know your thoughts and opinion. I think this is something that we do need to discuss. And if you have a different opinion or view or something that drop them down here. We talk about it. We could probably set up something that we can discuss this more and to get this out there. So there we go. So like I said, if you like it, if you like what I talked about, hit the like button, subscribe. I'm going to post all my funny content here. So trying to be entertaining for all of you. I enjoy every bit of this. So take care of yourselves out there. See you next time.